Prologue, Christmas 2024. The fire crackled low in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the wide plank floors of the Cross Ranch great room. Outside Montana, snow fell silent and thick, covering the valley in white. Inside, warmth. Inside, memory. Nathan Cross sat in his grandfather's leather chair, the one that had seen 4 generations of stories told and wisdom passed. At 82, his hands were gnarled like old oak, weathered by decades of work, but steady, always steady. His eyes, still sharp beneath white brows, watched his grandson pace before the fire. Jacob was 24, young, troubled. The kind of troubled that came from facing a choice that would define who he became. The young man stopped pacing and turned. His face held the same strong jaw Nathan saw in the mirror 60 years ago. The same intensity, the same struggle between what was easy and what was right. "Grandpa," Jacob said, his voice tight, "I don't know what to do." Nathan nodded slowly. He had heard this before, different words, same weight. Jacob was a lawyer in Helena now. Good job, promising career. But he had discovered something. His boss, a senior partner with political connections, was bearing evidence in a land fraud case. Not unlike the old days. Not unlike the schemes that had plagued Montana for over a century. Jacob could speak up, lose everything he had built, or stay silent, keep his career, live with the knowledge. "You want to hear a story?" Nathan asked. Jacob blinked. "Grandpa, I need advice, not..." "Stories are advice, boy. Just takes longer to understand them." Nathan gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Something in the old man's voice made Jacob obey. He sat. Nathan leaned back, his eyes distant now, seeing through the walls of the ranch house, through the years back to a night when the world had been painted in autumn colors and the air had smelled of coming winter. "It was October of 1878, Nathan began. "I was 26 years old, about your age. I had a small ranch, 300 acres against the Tobacco Root Mountains. Hard land, beautiful land, mine." He paused, letting the words settle. "I thought I knew who I was. Thought I had left my past behind. Thought I could live quiet and alone, and that would be enough." His voice dropped. Then I heard a scream. Jacob leaned forward. "A woman's scream," Nathan continued, "cutting through the twilight like a knife, coming from a barn I knew belonged to a man I despised. A man named William Crane." The fire popped. Snow whispered against the windows. "You know what I learned that night, Jacob?" Nathan's eyes locked on his grandson. "There are moments in life, just seconds, that define who you are. That night was my moment. What I chose in those seconds shaped everything that came after. This ranch, your grandmother, your mother, you." He reached for the poker and stirred the fire. Sparks flew up the chimney. "So yes, I'll tell you a story. About a choice I made. About a scream I answered. About the night I stopped running from who I was supposed to be." Nathan settled back in his chair. "And when I'm done, you'll know what to do about your boss. Not because I told you, but because you'll understand what it costs to be a man worth being." Jacob said nothing, just waited. Nathan closed his eyes and the years fell away like leaves from autumn trees. Montana Territory, October 15th, 1878. The kind of evening that made a man grateful for walls and warmth. The aspens had turned to gold along the creek beds, their leaves trembling in the wind that came down from the peaks like a warning. Winter was coming. You could taste it in the air, sharp and clean and unforgiving. Nathan Cross stood in the yard of his cabin, working leather by the last light of day. His hands moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had learned to do things right or not at all. The tack needed mending. The fence post needed setting. The stock needed tending. The work never ended. That was the point. Keep moving. Keep working. Don't think too hard about what you left behind. The cabin was small, 1 room. Stone fireplace he had built himself. Bed in the corner, table and 2 chairs, though he never used the second one. Shelves holding his few possessions, books mostly, and the gun belt he no longer wore but could not quite throw away. 300 acres. Not much by the standards of the big ranchers who were carving up Montana like a Sunday roast. But every inch of it was his. Bought with money he had saved from better days. Worked with sweat and determination and the stubborn refusal to quit that ran in the Cross family like a vein of iron through granite. He was proud of what he had built. proud in the quiet way of men who do not need others to validate their worth. But he was also alone. 3 years alone. 3 years since he had walked away from the life he thought he wanted. 3 years since he had pinned on a deputy marshal's badge in Silver Bow and believed he could make a difference in the lawless sprawl of Montana territory. 3 years since William Crane had taught him otherwise. The memory came unbidden, as it often did in the quiet moments. Crane in expensive clothes smiling that politician's smile. Crane with his lawyers and his documents and his connections to Judge Peterson. Crane who Nathan had arrested for fraud only to watch him walk free 2 weeks later when the judge dismissed every charge. Nathan had quit the next day, turned in his badge, rode north and bought this land and told himself he was done with the law, done with the corruption, done with watching evil men win because they had money and power and friends in high places. He would work his own land, answer to no one, bother no one, ask nothing of anyone. It was a good life, he told himself, clean, simple, honest. It was also a lie, because deep in the marrow of his bones, in the place where truth lives, when you stop lying to yourself, Nathan knew he had not left to find peace. He had left because he was afraid. Afraid of fighting a fight he could not win. Afraid of standing up and being knocked down. Afraid of the cost of being brave. So he mended tack and built fences and pretended the past did not exist. The gunshot shattered his pretense like glass. It came from the southwest, a flat crack that echoed off the mountain face and sent a flock of crows exploding from the cottonwoods in a dark wheeling cloud. Nathan's hands stilled on the leather. His body went quiet the way it used to when something was wrong, when trouble was close. In Montana territory, gunshots were common. Hunting, varmints, target practice, the normal sounds of frontier life. But then came the scream, high and sharp, a woman's voice, terror in every note, coming from the direction of the old Clausen barn, except it was not the Clausen barn anymore. Otto Clausen had lost it 2 years ago, lost it to the same man who had walked free from Nathan's jail cell. William Crane owned it now. The scream came again, and Nathan was already moving. His mind tried to catch up with his body, tried to apply reason and caution and all the careful walls he had built. This is not your business. You left the law behind. Crane is dangerous. You could get killed. This has nothing to do with you. But his hands were reaching for his mare's bridle. His feet were carrying him to the corral. His body, trained by years of law work, was responding to a sound every lawman knows, the sound of someone dying. He did not saddle the mare. No time. He grabbed a fistful of mane, swung himself onto her bare back, and kicked her into a gallop before his rational mind could talk him out of it. The distance between his ranch and the barn was perhaps half a mile across open range. His mare ate it up in great lunging strides, her hooves drumming against the hard earth like a heartbeat. The sun had dropped below the western peaks, leaving the sky bruised purple and orange. In that uncertain light, Nathan could see the barn rising like a dark monument against the fading day. He remembered when Otto Clausen had built it back in '73, a massive structure of hand-hewn logs that had taken the old German farmer and his sons an entire summer to complete. Nathan had helped with the raising along with half the men in the valley. It had been a good day, one of those rare occasions when scattered homesteaders came together, when the work was hard but the company was good, when you remembered why you had come to this hard country in the first place. That was before Otto's wife took sick, before the medical bills, before Crane appeared with cash money and sympathetic words and papers that somehow transferred the deed to his name, while Otto and his boys packed their wagon and headed back east, their faces hollow with defeat. The barn looked different now. Darker somehow, though Nathan could not say why. The lamplight visible through the gaps in the logs seemed sickly and wrong. He was 50 yards out when he saw the door was barred from the outside. A thick beam of timber, the kind used for serious security, had been dropped across the door handles. Someone had locked the barn from the outside. Someone had trapped whoever was inside. You do not bar a door from the outside unless you want to keep something in, or someone. Nathan pulled his mare up hard and slid off her back while she was still moving. His boots hit the ground running. He covered the last 20 yards at a sprint, his breath coming fast, his heart hammering. Up close, he could hear voices inside. A man's voice low and cruel, a woman's voice pleading. Please, she was saying, please, I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't. The sound of a blow cut her off. Flesh on flesh. Brutal. Unmistakable. Something crashed inside. Wood splintering. Nathan grabbed the beam with both hands. It was heavy. Green oak still damp with sap. It took all his strength to lift it free. The moment it came loose, he threw it aside and grabbed the door handle. It stuck. He yanked harder, putting his shoulder into it. The door suddenly gave way with a shriek of protesting hinges, and Nathan stumbled forward into lamplight and chaos. The barn. The interior was a maze of shadows and golden light. Stalls lined both walls, most of them empty. The floor was strewn with old straw that rustled underfoot. An oil lamp hung from a chain swinging slightly, making the shadows dance. In the center of the space stood William Crane. 3 years had not changed him much. He was still a big man, barrel-chested and thick-armed, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the coldness in his pale eyes. He wore a black suit, despite the setting impeccably tailored, with a gold watch chain gleaming across his vest. His right hand held a revolver pointed casually downward. His left hand was clenched in a fist, and Nathan could see blood on the knuckles. On the floor at Crane's feet, crumpled against an overturned crate, was a woman. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and hung in tangled waves around her face. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and blood ran from her split lip down her chin, dripping onto the white lace of her collar. But it was her eyes that caught Nathan. Dark eyes, wide with terror, but not empty, not beaten, not yet. For a moment, nobody moved. The lamp swung on its chain. The shadows danced. Outside, Nathan's mare whinnied nervously. Then William Crane smiled. That politician's smile, all teeth and no warmth. Well now, Crane said, his voice smooth as oil. Nathan Cross didn't expect company this evening. I'm afraid you've caught us at an inconvenient moment. Nathan kept his eyes on the gun in Crane's hand. His own revolver was back at his cabin, hanging on a peg by the door. Utterly useless. He had nothing but his hands and whatever words he could summon. Heard a scream, Nathan said. His voice came out steady, which surprised him. Heard a gunshot. Did you now? Crane's smile did not waver. Well, as you can see, everything's under control here. Just a private business discussion. Nothing that concerns you. The woman on the floor made a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a word. Her eyes found Nathan's, and in them he saw a desperate plea. Doesn't look like business to me, Nathan said quietly. Crane's smile thinned. I said it doesn't concern you, Cross. You do well to remember that. Now I'm going to suggest politely that you turn around and ride back to that little scratch farm of yours. Forget what you saw here. Forget you heard anything. We'll all be better for it. Can't do that. The two words hung in the air like smoke. Crane's eyebrows rose. Can't or won't. Both. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. The oil lamp swung, the shadows danced. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled its loneliness to the rising moon. Crane shifted his weight. The gun in his hand came up. Not pointing directly at Nathan. Not yet. But the threat was clear. You're making a mistake, Cross. Crane's voice had lost its smooth edge. A serious mistake. This woman is a thief and a fraud. She's been trying to make claims on property that doesn't belong to her. I'm well within my rights to detain her until the sheriff can be summoned. Sheriff's 3 days' ride from here, Nathan said. And I don't see any rope. Don't see any legal warrant. What I see is a woman bleeding on your floor and a barred door. Crane's face darkened. What you see is none of your business. You made it my business when you barred that door. Nathan took a step forward. Whatever's happening here, it stops now. The lady comes with me. The lady, ow, Crane said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Goes nowhere. And if you take one more step, I'll put a bullet in you and claim self-defense. Your word against mine. And we both know whose word carries more weight in this valley. It was true. Crane had money, influence, friends in territorial politics. Nathan Cross had 300 acres of rock and grass and a reputation for keeping to himself. If it came down to a legal fight, there was no contest. But Nathan had spent 3 years in this country learning that sometimes the law was a luxury you could not afford. Sometimes you had to make your own justice and live with the consequences. He took another step forward. Crane's thumb moved to the hammer of his revolver. Wait, Crane's eyes narrowed. I know you, Deputy Cross from Silverbow. I thought you quit the law. Nathan felt something cold settle in his gut. Of course Crane would remember. Men like Crane never forgot the men who tried to cage them. I did, Nathan said. 3 years ago. Crane's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it now. Only recognition, only the satisfaction of a man who had won before and would win again. After you let me walk on those fraud charges, Crane said. Still carrying that guilt, are you? Is that what this is? Some pathetic attempt at redemption? The words hit like fists. Because they were true. Every syllable was true. Nathan had let Crane walk. Not because he wanted to, but because he had not been strong enough to fight a corrupt system. He had arrested Crane, built a case, gathered evidence, and watched it all crumble when Judge Peterson dismissed every charge with a wave of his hand and a wink to Crane's lawyers. Nathan had quit rather than fight, had run rather than stand, had chosen comfort over courage, and William Crane knew it. This isn't about redemption, Nathan said, though his voice was less steady now. This is about a woman who's hurt and afraid. Let her go. No. Crane's gun came up another inch. You had your chance to stop me 3 years ago. You failed. You quit. You ran away like a coward. And now you come into my barn making demands. You have no authority here, Cross. No badge, no gun, no reason for me to listen to anything you say. Then don't listen, Nathan said. Shoot me. Pull that trigger, kill an unarmed man. See how that plays when the territorial marshal hears about it. The marshal won't hear about it, Crane said, because there will be no one left to tell him. The woman moved. She had been so still that Nathan had almost forgotten she could move. But now she lunged sideways with desperate speed, grabbing a piece of broken crate and hurling it at Crane's gun hand. It was a wild throw, uncoordinated. But it caught Crane by surprise. He jerked back instinctively, and the revolver barked deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. The bullet went into the barn's roof, sending down a shower of dust and splinters. Nathan did not think. He charged. He covered the space between them in 3 long strides and hit Crane like a battering ram, driving his shoulder into the bigger man's chest. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fury, crashing into the straw with bone-jarring force. The gun went flying, spinning away into the shadows. Crane was strong, stronger than Nathan expected. He got a hand around Nathan's throat and squeezed. His face contorted with rage, and Nathan could smell whiskey on his breath. Nathan drove a fist into Crane's ribs. Once, twice. He felt something give, heard Crane grunt in pain. The grip on his throat loosened, and Nathan tore free, rolling away and coming up in a crouch. They faced each other across 3 feet of straw-littered floor, both breathing hard. You're a dead man, Crane snarled. Blood ran from his nose, dark in the lamplight. You hear me, dead? Not tonight, Nathan said. Crane lunged, but he was off balance, with angry telegraphing his moves. Nathan sidestepped and brought his fist around in a short, sharp arc that connected with Crane's jaw. The impact jarred up Nathan's arm to his shoulder, but Crane went down like a felled tree, hitting the floor hard enough to raise dust. He did not get up. For a long moment, Nathan stood over him, his chest heaving, his knuckles screaming. He became aware of sounds, his own ragged breathing, the creak of the lamp chain, and behind him, soft sobbing. He turned. The woman had pulled herself to her feet, one hand braced against the wall for support. She was shaking violently, her whole body trembling like a leaf in a high wind. The blood on her face looked black in the lamplight. Ma'am, Nathan said softly. He held out a hand, careful not to move too quickly. You're safe now. I'm going to get you out of here. She stared at him with eyes that had seen too much. For a moment, he thought she might bolt. Then slowly, very slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold as ice. Can you walk? He asked. She nodded. But when she tried to take a step, her legs buckled. Nathan caught her before she fell, his arm going around her waist to steady her. She was lighter than he expected, and she leaned against him with the desperate trust of someone who had no other choice. Easy, he murmured. I've got you. Behind them, Crane groaned and stirred. Nathan looked back and saw the man pushing himself up on one elbow, his face a mask of blood and fury. This isn't over, Cross, Crane spat. Not by a long shot. You've just signed your death warrant, mine and hers both. Nathan wanted to say something defiant, something that would put Crane in his place. But the woman in his arms was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, and he realized that words did not matter. Not anymore. What mattered was getting her away from this place, away from this monster. Before Crane recovered enough to try again, he half carried her toward the door, moving as quickly as he dared. The barn seemed enormous now, the shadows deeper. Every sound made him flinch. His mare was still outside, thank God, cropping nervously at the sparse grass near the doorway. They stumbled out into the night air, and Nathan sucked in a breath of wind that tasted like freedom. The stars were coming out overhead, cold and bright and indifferent. "Can you ride?" he asked the woman. "I think so." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Nathan guided her to his mare, then cupped his hands to give her a leg up. She settled onto the horse's back with a wince, and Nathan swung up behind her. The mare shifted under their combined weight, but held steady. "Where?" the woman started to say. "My place," Nathan said. "It's not far. You'll be safe there." Behind them, from inside the barn, came the sound of something heavy being knocked over, followed by a string of curses. Crane was on his feet. They were out of time. Nathan kicked the mare into a trot, then a canter, then a full gallop. The woman swayed in front of him, and he tightened his arm around her waist to keep her from falling. She did not protest. She just leaned back against him and let him carry her into the darkness. The ride back to his cabin passed in a blur of pounding hooves and rushing wind. Nathan kept expecting to hear pursuit, gunshots, shouting, the thunder of horses, but there was nothing, just the night and the stars and the woman trembling in his arms. When his cabin finally appeared, a dark shape against the darker bulk of the mountains, Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. He slowed the mare to a walk for the last 100 yards, then stopped in front of his door and slid down. The woman swayed dangerously, and he reached up to help her dismount. "Easy," he said again. "We're here." She let him lift her down, and he was struck again by how light she was, how fragile. Up close, he could see the damage more clearly. The split lip, the darkening bruise across her cheekbone, the torn dress, but he could also see the set of her jaw, the way she held herself upright despite everything. This was a woman who had been beaten, but not broken. "I need to see to my horse," Nathan said. "Can you stand?" She nodded, and he released her carefully. She swayed but stayed upright, one hand braced against the cabin wall. Nathan led his mare to the small corral behind the cabin and quickly stripped off her bridle. She had earned her grain tonight, and then some. When he returned to the cabin, the woman was exactly where he had left her, still standing, still upright, waiting. Nathan opened the door and gestured inside. "Please." She hesitated for just a moment, then stepped across the threshold. The cabin Nathan followed, leaving the door open to catch what little moonlight there was. His cabin was simple, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-built bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves holding his meager possessions. It was not much, but it was clean, and it was his. He moved to the fireplace and began building up the banked coals, adding kindling until small flames licked to life. The light grew, pushing back the shadows, and in its warm glow he could finally see the woman properly. She was beautiful, he realized with a start, even battered and bleeding, even terrified. There was something arresting about her face. High cheekbones, a strong nose, a mouth that looked like it was made for both laughter and defiance. Her dress beneath the dirt and blood was well made, the kind of thing that spoke of money and taste. What was a woman like this doing in William Crane's barn? "Sit," Nathan said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Please, I'll get water." She sank into the chair like her strings had been cut. Nathan hurried to the bucket he kept by the door. He dipped a clean cloth into the cold water, wrung it out, and brought it back to her. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. Nathan knelt in front of her, careful to keep his movements slow and unthreatening. Gently, he began to clean the blood from her face. She flinched at the first touch, then held still, her eyes fixed on something beyond his shoulder. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought. Maybe 21 or 22. Young enough that the hardness in her eyes looked wrong, like armor that did not quite fit. "What's your name?" he asked softly. For a long moment, she did not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Sarah, Sarah Bennett." "I'm Nathan, Nathan Cross." "I know." A ghost of a smile touched her split lip. "I've seen you at the general store in town. You're the rancher with the place up against the mountains." "That's me." He rinsed the cloth, the water turning pink. "Miss Bennett, Sarah. What happened back there? Why was Crane—" "He killed my father." The words fell like stones into still water. Nathan's hands stilled. "What?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "My father, James Bennett. He owned the ranch adjacent to Crane's, the one with the good water rights in the timber. Crane wanted it badly, but father wouldn't sell. So Crane—" her voice broke. "He made it look like a riding accident. But I know. I know what he did." Nathan sat back on his heels, his mind racing. James Bennett. He remembered the name vaguely. A quiet man, kept to himself, had arrived in the territory maybe 4 years back. Nathan had never met him personally, but he had heard the man was a widower, had a daughter back east, finishing her schooling. "When did this happen?" Nathan asked. "6 months ago. I came out as soon as I got the telegram. But by the time I arrived, Crane already had his hooks in everything. He claimed father owed him money, had documents to prove it. The sheriff—" her mouth twisted bitterly. "The sheriff said there was nothing he could do without proof of fraud. And tonight," Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, "I found something. Letters, hidden in father's things. Letters that prove Crane forged the debt documents. Letters that show father discovered something on the land. Mineral deposits, I think. Something valuable. Crane found out I had them. He came to the house this afternoon with 2 of his men. I ran. I thought I could hide in the old Clausen barn until I could get to the territorial marshal in Helena. But he followed me. He barred the door and—" she stopped, swallowing hard. "He said I could sign over the ranch voluntarily, or he would make me sign, one way or another." Nathan felt something cold and hard settle in his gut. This was worse than he had thought. Much worse. Crane was not just a bully or a land grabber. He was a murderer. And Sarah Bennett was the only thing standing between him and everything he wanted. "Where are the letters now?" Nathan asked. "Hidden. Back at the ranch. I didn't dare bring them with me. If Crane found them on me, I'd have nothing left to bargain with." Nathan stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. His mind was working through possibilities, discarding options, weighing risks. Crane knew where Nathan lived. Crane had resources, men, influence. If he wanted Sarah dead, and he clearly did, it would only be a matter of time before he came calling. But if they could get those letters, if they could get them to someone who mattered, the territorial marshal, a federal judge, someone beyond Crane's reach, then maybe Sarah had a chance. Maybe they both did. "How far is your ranch from here?" he asked. 8 miles, maybe 9. "And you're sure the letters are safe? Hidden in a place only I know." "My father showed me years ago when I was just a girl, a space behind a loose stone in the fireplace." Nathan turned to look at her. Sarah stood moving to join him at the window. Her eyes searched his face. "You won't go alone," he said. The words were out before he fully registered, making the decision. "I'll go with you." She stared at him. "Why, you don't know me. You don't owe me anything. If you help me, Crane will come after you too. He meant what he said back there. He'll kill you." "Maybe," Nathan said, "but I can't unhear that scream. Can't unsee what I saw in that barn. If I turn my back now, if I let you face this alone—" he shook his head, "I wouldn't be able to live with myself. You could die. We all die eventually. Might as well make it count for something." For a long moment, Sarah just stared at him. Then tears spilled down her cheeks. Real tears now. Not the desperate kind from before, but something deeper. Something like hope mixed with grief. He met her eyes. "I've been hiding up here ever since, telling myself it wasn't my fight, that I had done my part and it was someone else's turn." Nathan's voice dropped. "But maybe it always was my fight. Maybe that's why I heard your scream tonight. Maybe that's why I'm standing here instead of riding away." Sarah's eyes widened. "You arrested him before and let him go, or the system let him go while I watched." Nathan turned back to the window. "So yes, I'll help you, not just because it's right, but because I need to know if courage matters. If standing up when it's hard makes any difference at all. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, real tears now. Not the desperate kind from before, but something deeper, something like hope mixed with grief. "Nobody's helped me since Father died," she whispered. "Everyone's too afraid of Crane, and I don't blame them, but I've been so alone, and I thought I was going to die in that barn tonight. And then you—" She could not finish. "Hey," Nathan's voice was gentle. "Hey, it's all right, I promise. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep. Then I'll do my damnedest to keep this one." Something shifted in her expression, grief giving way to something harder, more determined. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and straightened her shoulders. "The letters," she said. "We need to get them tonight, before Crane has time to regroup, before he posts men around my ranch." Nathan nodded slowly. "It's dangerous. If he's there, he won't be, not yet. He'll go back to his place first, gather reinforcements. He's arrogant, but he's not stupid. He won't come alone, not after you laid him out." She paused. "We have maybe 2, 3 hours before he organizes himself. If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Every instinct Nathan had screamed that this was madness. Riding into the night to break into a ranch that might already be under surveillance. Hunting for letters that might or might not prove anything. All on the word of a woman he had met less than an hour ago. It was the kind of thing that got men killed. But then he remembered the sound of that scream. Remembered the blood on Sarah's face and the gun in Crane's hand. Remembered the cold calculation in the man's eyes. Some things were worth the risk. "All right," Wendy said. "We go tonight, but we do this smart. We go in quiet, get the letters, and get out. No heroics, no confrontations. In and out. Understand?" "In and out," Sarah agreed. "Good." Nathan moved to his gun belt hanging by the door and buckled it on. The weight of the Colt on his hip was reassuring. "We'll take my mare and your father's horse if it's still in the barn. Move faster with 2 mounts. It should be there. Crane's men haven't touched the livestock yet. They're waiting until the property is legally transferred." Her voice dripped sarcasm on the word legally. Nathan checked his revolver, ensuring it was loaded, then grabbed his rifle from above the door. Sarah watched him with an expression he could not quite read. "You really mean to do this?" she said. It was not quite a question. "I really mean to do this. Even though you could die. Even though—" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you. I know those words aren't enough, but thank you." Nathan looked at her, this brave, broken woman who had been through hell and was preparing to walk back into it. And he felt something shift in his chest. Something he did not have a name for yet. "Thank me when we're both still breathing tomorrow," he said. They left the cabin 5 minutes later, moving into the Montana night with nothing but moonlight to guide them and the fragile hope that they might survive until dawn. The ride to the Bennett Ranch took them across open range and through stands of pine that whispered secrets in the wind. Nathan rode with every sense alert, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, any hint that they were not alone. Beside him, Sarah sat her father's horse with the ease of someone who had grown up in the saddle. Despite her Eastern schooling, despite the years away, Montana was in her blood. They did not speak. Words seemed dangerous somehow, as if they might carry on the wind and betray their presence to watching eyes. The only sounds were the soft thud of hooves on hard earth, the creak of leather, and the occasional call of a nightbird hunting in the darkness. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows, but not bright enough to make them feel exposed. It was the kind of light that could save you or damn you, depending on who was doing the looking. Nathan's mind kept circling back to what Sarah had told him. William Crane had killed her father, made it look like an accident. And now he wanted to kill her too, to take everything James Bennett had built and leave nothing but silence and stolen land. It was the same pattern Nathan had seen in Silver Bow, the same ruthless calculation, the same willingness to destroy lives for profit. But this time Nathan would not stand by and watch. This time he would not quit when things got hard. This time he would finish what he started. The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. A sturdy 2-story structure built of logs and stone with a wide porch and shuttered windows. Beside it stood a barn and a smaller outbuilding, probably a bunkhouse or equipment shed. In the moonlight it looked peaceful, almost serene, but Nathan felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something's wrong, he murmured. Sarah had gone rigid in her saddle. The lamp in the parlor window. It's lit. Nathan followed her gaze and saw it, a dim glow visible through one of the downstairs windows. You didn't leave it burning, he asked, though he already knew the answer. No, I left hours before dark. Everything was shuttered and dark. They sat their horses on the rise, neither moving, both staring at that telltale light. Someone was in the house. The question was who? Could be Crane's men, Nathan said quietly, posted as guards. Could be, Sarah's voice was tight, or it could be a trap. Either way, we need those letters. She looked at him. In the moonlight, her face was pale but determined. Either way, they dismounted and tied their horses to a pine tree far enough from the house that they would not spook and give them away. Nathan checked his Colt again, more for reassurance than necessity. Sarah produced a small derringer from somewhere in her skirts. Can you use that? Nathan asked. Father taught me, she said. Her smile was grim. He said a woman alone needed to be able to protect herself. Smart man, Nathan thought. Pity he had not been able to protect himself from William Crane. They approached the house from the side, using the outbuildings for cover, moving slowly enough that their footsteps made no sound on the hard earth. The night was alive with small noises, wind in the eaves, an owl hunting somewhere in the distance, the creak of settling wood. Any one of them could mask the sound of waiting men. They reached the side of the house and pressed themselves against the wall. The window above them was dark, but they could hear something from inside. Voices, low and indistinct. Nathan looked at Sarah and mouthed silently. How many? She held up 2 fingers and shrugged. Maybe 2, maybe more. He gestured toward the back of the house and she nodded. They crept along the wall until they reached a door. Sarah indicated with a hand signal. The kitchen entrance. She reached for the latch, testing it carefully. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Why lock doors when you were waiting to spring an ambush? Sarah eased the door open an inch at a time, wincing at every tiny squeak of the hinges. The kitchen beyond was dark and silent. Nathan slipped through, first his gun drawn, sweeping the room. Empty. Sarah followed, and together they moved through the kitchen into a narrow hallway that ran toward the front of the house. The voices were clearer now. 2 men definitely, maybe 3. Don't know what Crane's so worried about, one of them was saying. She's just a girl. She ain't gonna cause no trouble. You didn't see her face when she found them. Letters? Another voice replied. She looked like she wanted to gut him. Crane's smart to want her dealt with permanent like. Sarah's hand found Nathan's arm, her fingers digging in hard. He could feel her shaking. Not with fear, he realized, with rage. She leaned close to his ear, her lips barely moving. Parlor. Fireplace is there. Nathan nodded. The parlor was where the light was, where the men were, and where presumably the letters were hidden. They had to get past 2, possibly 3 armed men, retrieve the letters from their hiding place, and get out without being seen or shot. The odds were not good, but they were the only odds they had. He leaned close to Sarah's ear. Can you get to the fireplace without being seen? She thought for a moment, then nodded. There's a connecting door from the study. If I can get to the study, I can slip in while they're distracted. How am I supposed to distract 2 armed men? Her smile was fierce. You'll think of something. Before he could argue, she was moving, gliding silently down the hallway toward a door on the right. Nathan watched her disappear into the darkness, then turned his attention to the parlor. The door was half open, spilling lamplight into the hall. Through the gap, Nathan could see 2 men sitting in chairs, their backs to the hallway. They were playing cards on a low table, a bottle of whiskey between them. Both wore gun belts. Nathan took a breath, steadied himself, and stepped into the doorway. Evening, gentlemen, he said pleasantly. Both men jerked around, hands flying to their guns. Nathan already had his Colt leveled. I wouldn't, he said. Nothing personal, but I'd rather not shoot you if I don't have to. Makes an awful mess on the carpet. The 2 men froze. They were rough types, the kind of hired muscle that could be found in any frontier town. Hard faces, harder eyes, and not much in the way of imagination. Who the hell are you? The first one demanded. Name's Nathan Cross, he said. I'm looking for some property that doesn't belong to Mr. Crane. I'm hoping you gentlemen might be able to help me locate it. You're the one, the second man said slowly, the one who busted up Crane tonight. Guilty as charged. You got some stones, Mr. Walking in here like this. You know how many men Crane's got? Enough to make this interesting. Nathan agreed, but not enough to bring to a friendly card game, apparently. What were you fellows playing 5-card draw? The men exchanged glances, clearly uncertain how to handle this situation. Nathan kept his gun steady and his eyes alert, watching for any sign that they might try something stupid. Behind them, through the connecting door that Sarah had mentioned, he caught the faintest glimpse of movement. She was in position. Here's how this is going to work, Nathan said, his voice hardening. You're both going to stand up real slow, and you're going to unbuckle those gun belts and let them drop. Then you're going to walk out that front door and keep walking until you're off this property. You do that, and everyone lives to see morning. And if we don't, the first man asked, then we find out if I'm as fast as I think I am. Nathan smiled, but there was no humor in it. Your choice, gentlemen. For a moment, he thought they might actually try it. He could see the calculation in their eyes, weighing their chances 2 against 1, their guns already holstered, his already drawn. Not impossible odds, but not good ones either. The first man must have been the smarter of the two because he raised his hand slowly and stood. All right, he said. All right, we're going. Ain't worth dying over. The second man looked like he wanted to argue, but his partner shot him a warning glance. Reluctantly, he stood as well. Gun belts, Nathan reminded them. They unbuckled their belts and let them fall with a clatter. Behind them, Nathan saw Sarah's hand emerge from behind the connecting door, reaching toward the fireplace. She was working at something, her movements quick and precise. Now walk, Nathan said. Front door, nice and easy. The men moved toward the door, their movements slow and deliberate. Nathan backed up to give them room, his gun never wavering. They passed him single file, their eyes full of resentment, but their hands empty. The front door opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the porch, then faded into the night. Nathan waited, counting to 10 before he allowed himself to lower his gun. Sarah. She emerged from the parlor, her face flushed with triumph, a small leather envelope clutched in her hands. Got them, she said breathlessly. All of them. Letters, documents, everything Father hid. Then let's get the hell out of here before those two find their courage. They ran out through the kitchen, across the yard, past the outbuildings to where their horses waited. Nathan untied them with hands that shook just slightly from the aftermath of adrenaline, and they mounted up just as shouting erupted from the direction of the ranch house. The two men had found their courage after all, or maybe reinforcements. Ride, Nathan shouted. They kicked their horses into a gallop and thundered into the night, the leather envelope with its precious cargo pressed safely against Sarah's chest. Behind them, gunshots cracked like breaking branches, but they were already too far. Already swallowed by darkness and distance. They rode hard for an hour before Nathan felt safe enough to slow. His mare was lathered and blowing, and Sarah's horse was not much better. They found a small creek and stopped to let the animals drink and rest. Sarah dismounted on shaking legs and sank down onto a fallen log. In the moonlight, her face was pale but determined. We did it, she said wonderingly. We actually did it. Nathan tied off the horses and came to sit beside her. Now that the danger had passed, he felt exhaustion crashing over him in waves. His hands were shaking, his heart still racing. What's in those letters? He asked. Sarah opened the envelope carefully and drew out several pieces of paper. Even in the dim light, Nathan could see they were covered in neat handwriting. Father's correspondence with a surveyor, Sarah said softly, scanning the pages. The surveyor found copper deposits on the ranch, high-grade ore, worth a fortune. She flipped to another page. Father was planning to file mining claims, but he wanted to be sure of his legal rights first. He wrote to a lawyer in Helena. These are the lawyer's responses. They prove Father owned the land free and clear. They prove Crane's debt documents are forgeries. She flipped to another page and her voice dropped. And there's more. A letter Father wrote but never sent, detailing threats Crane made, threats to kill him if he didn't sell. Nathan let out a long breath. That's enough to hang him, more than enough. If we can get it to someone who will listen, Sarah said. She looked at him, her eyes fierce in the moonlight. Crane has friends, powerful friends. The sheriff won't move against him without orders from above. Then we go above, Nathan said. Helena's a week's ride from here. The territorial marshal has jurisdiction over murder cases. We take this to him. Crane won't be able to bribe or threaten his way out. A week, Sarah said quietly. Crane will come after us before then. He'll hunt us. Let him try. Nathan checked his rifle, his jaw set. We've got truth on our side, and sometimes that's enough. Sarah was quiet for a moment, looking at the letters in her hands, then at Nathan. There's something else you should know, she said. The lawyer father wrote to. Jonathan Hughes. Do you know that name? Nathan frowned. Hughes, Jonathan Hughes. Recognition sparked. Wait, I've heard that name. He was a good lawyer, honest. One of the few in Helena who couldn't be bought. Was, Sarah said. He died 3 months ago. They said it was a heart attack. The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He stared at Sarah, understanding dawning cold and sick in his gut. Crane, he said. I think so, Sarah said. Father's last letter to Hughes was dated 2 weeks before Father died. Hughes's response came a week later, then silence. Then Hughes was dead. Then Father was dead. Too many coincidences. Nathan felt rage building in his chest, not just one murder, not just James Bennett, but a pattern. A deliberate, calculated campaign of violence designed to steal land and silence anyone who stood in the way. How many, he said, his voice rough, how many people has Crane killed? I don't know, Sarah said, but I think we're about to find out, because if we don't stop him, the killing won't end with us. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they carried settling on their shoulders like a physical burden. Then Nathan stood. We need supplies, he said. Fresh horses if we can get them. The Porter trading post is closest, half a day's ride from here. Will they help us? Sarah asked. George Porter owes me a favor, Nathan said, and he's not the type to ask questions. They mounted up and rode on the night, deepening around them. By the time dawn broke, they had covered another 20 miles. The country was changing around them from wild frontier to something more settled. They began to see signs of habitation. Smoke from distant chimneys, fences marking property lines, the bones of civilization reaching into the wilderness. The Porter trading post appeared through the morning mist like something out of a fever dream. A ramshackle collection of buildings clustered around a natural spring, with smoke rising from the chimney and the smell of frying bacon drifting on the wind. George Porter himself was out front splitting wood when they rode up. His broad back bent to the task, his axe rising and falling with mechanical precision. He was a bear of a man in his 50s with a gray shot beard and hands like slabs of granite. When he saw Nathan, his weathered face split into a grin. Well, I'll be damned, Nathan Cross. Thought you'd be holed up on that ranch of yours till spring. Plans changed. Nathan dismounted stiffly, his legs nearly buckling. He reached up to help Sarah down, and she leaned against him briefly, too tired to be self-conscious about it. George, we need supplies, food, ammunition, grain for the horses, and we need them quick. George's smile faded as he took in their appearance. The exhaustion, the bruises on Sarah's face, the way Nathan kept glancing back at the trail they had used. What kind of trouble you bring into my door, boy? He asked. The kind that won't follow if we're gone before it arrives. Nathan pulled out what money he had, counting coins with clumsy fingers. Can you help us or not? George studied them both for a long moment, his eyes shrewd despite the folksy manner. Then he nodded. Come inside. Feed yourselves while I put together what you need. But Nathan, this favor squares us. Understand? After this, we're even. Understood. The interior of the trading post was dim and cluttered, smelling of leather and tobacco and the distinctive musk of fur pelts. Shelves lined every wall, packed with everything a frontier trader might need. Tools, blankets, ammunition, canned goods, whiskey, medicine. George's wife Anne appeared from the back room. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s with kind eyes and capable hands. She took one look at Sarah's battered face and immediately began fussing over her with the fierce tenderness of a woman who had seen too much suffering and refused to accept it. Sit, child, Anne ordered, guiding Sarah to a chair near the stove. Let me see those bruises. George, get the salve from the medicine cabinet and some of that beef stew from last night. These two look half-starved. While Anne tended to Sarah, George pulled Nathan aside, his voice low. What's this really about? He asked. Nathan hesitated, weighing how much to say. George Porter was a good man, but he was also a survivor, and survivors did not take unnecessary risks. William Crane, Nathan said finally. He killed the lady's father, tried to steal her ranch. We've got proof, but Crane wants her dead before she can get it to the authorities. George's expression darkened. Crane should have known. That man's poisoned Nathan. Pure poison. He paused. How many men he got hunting you? Started with 6. Could be more by now. And you're headed to Helena. No choice. The territorial marshal's the only one with authority to move against Crane. George scratched his beard thoughtfully. That's 7 days hard riding minimum. Longer if you're trying to avoid Crane's men. You'll never make it on those horses. They're done in already. I know, Nathan said, but I don't have money for fresh mounts. Didn't say you needed money. George moved to the window, peering out at the misty morning. I got 2 horses out back I've been trying to sell, a bay gelding named Flint and a dappled gray mare called Silver. Good animals, both of them. Strong backs, sure feet. You can take them. Leave yours here to rest up. When you come back through, we'll settle up proper. Nathan felt something tight in his chest loosen. George, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. George turned back, his eyes hard. That girl in there don't deserve what Crane's done to her, and you don't deserve to die for doing the right thing. He paused. Besides, Crane's been squeezing folks in this valley for too long. Maybe it's time someone stood up to him. If helping you gets that done, then that's payment enough. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still got to make it to Helena alive. While George assembled their provisions, Nathan joined Sarah at the table where Anne had set out bowls of thick beef stew and fresh bread. The food was simple but hot, and Nathan could not remember anything tasting better. Sarah ate mechanically, barely seeming to taste it, her eyes distant. Anne sat down across from them, her face grave. Crane did this to you, she asked Sarah quietly. Sarah nodded. Anne's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. He killed our son. The words fell into the warm kitchen, like stones into still water. Nathan's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Sarah looked up, shock and recognition mingling on her face. Your son, Sarah whispered. Thomas, Anne said. 2 years ago, they said it was a riding accident, said his horse spooked and threw him, broke his neck. She wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. But Thomas was the best rider I ever knew. Been on horses since he could walk. That boy could stick to a saddle through anything. The horse, Sarah said, understanding dawning. What happened to the horse? Gone, Anne said bitterly. Disappeared the same day Thomas died. Crane's foreman said it must have run off. But horses don't just vanish. Her hands clenched on the table. I think they killed that horse to hide what they did. Whatever they used to make Thomas fall, they couldn't risk anyone examining the animal afterward. Sarah reached across the table and took Anne's hands. My father, she said. 6 months ago, riding accident, they said. But I know Crane killed him. Just like he killed your son. The 2 women sat, their hands clasped, connected by grief and rage and the terrible knowledge that William Crane had stolen from them both. George came back into the room, his arms full of supplies. He saw his wife crying, and his face hardened. You got proof, he asked Sarah. Real proof that Crane killed your father. Sarah pulled the leather envelope from inside her coat. Letters, documents, everything needed to prove Crane forged the debt papers and murdered my father for his land. Then take our horses, George said fiercely. Take them and ride like hell to Helena. And when they hang that bastard, you come back here and tell us about it. Tell us Thomas is avenged. Anne stood and pulled Sarah into a fierce embrace. You're stronger than you know, child, she said. Don't let that monster make you forget it. She pressed a basket of additional food into Sarah's hands. Dried fruit, hard cheese, smoked sausage. For the road. And dear, she pulled Sarah close again. When this is over, you come back. Come back and tell old Anne how you put that snake in the ground where he belongs. Sarah was crying now, real tears. I will, she promised. I will. 20 minutes later, they were riding out on fresh horses. George's bay gelding, Flint, was strong and eager. The dappled gray mare Silver had the smoothest gait Nathan had ever felt. They were a significant upgrade from their exhausted mounts. As they left the trading post behind, Sarah turned to Nathan. They lost their son, she said, just like I lost my father. How many families has Crane destroyed? Too many, Nathan said, but we're going to stop him. For Thomas Porter, for James Bennett, For everyone Crane has hurt. For everyone he would hurt if we don't stop him, Sarah added. They rode on in silence, the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. This was no longer just about Sarah's inheritance or Nathan's redemption. This was about justice for people who could not fight back, about stopping a monster before he claimed more victims. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist, and Nathan Cross rode toward Helena with a purpose he had not felt in 3 years. The North Ridge Trail was everything George had promised. Rough, rocky, steep enough in places that they had to dismount and lead the horses. But it kept them off the main routes where Crane's men might be watching. By midday, they had climbed above the tree line, riding along a knife-edge ridge with drops on both sides that made Nathan's stomach clench. The wind up here was constant and cold, carrying the smell of snow from the peaks above. Sarah rode ahead of him, her back straight, despite exhaustion, her eyes scanning the trail. She had barely spoken since leaving the Porters, and Nathan could see her mind working behind her eyes. Processing, planning, preparing for whatever came next. She was stronger than she looked, he realized. Stronger than she probably knew herself. Crane had beaten her, terrorized her, tried to break her. But she was still riding, still fighting, still refusing to give up. It was the kind of strength that came from deep inside, the kind you could not teach or fake. You either had it or you did not. Sarah Bennett had it. Nathan, her voice cut through his thoughts. She had stopped her horse and was pointing ahead across a parallel ridge, perhaps a mile away. 3 riders, moving in the same direction, matching their pace. Nathan's jaw tightened. Could be anyone. Could be, Sarah said, but her voice said she did not believe it. They watched the distant figures for a moment. The riders moved when Nathan and Sarah moved, stopped when they stopped, tracking them or herding them towards something. We need to move faster, Nathan said, scanning the trail ahead. The ridge continued for another few miles before dropping into a forested valley. If they could reach the tree cover before the other riders closed the distance, they might be able to lose them. The horses, Sarah started to say. We'll hold, come on. They pushed into a trot, dangerous on the narrow trail but necessary. Flint responded to Nathan's urgency with a burst of speed that nearly unseated him, and behind him he heard Sarah urging Silver on. The parallel riders matched their pace, and Nathan felt his gut tighten with certainty. This was deliberate. This was a hunt. The ridge trail began to descend, switchbacking down a steep slope covered in loose scree. The horses picked their way carefully, their hooves sending small avalanches of stone rattling down the mountainside. Every minute felt like an hour, and Nathan kept glancing across the valley at the distant riders, expecting at any moment to see rifles raised. Aimed, but the shot never came. The riders just kept pace, watching, waiting. They're driving us, Sarah said suddenly, pushing us towards something, somewhere they want us to go. Nathan realized she was right. The riders were not trying to catch them. They were herding them like cattle, keeping them moving in a specific direction, which meant there was probably another group waiting ahead, ready to spring the trap. But we need to break the pattern, Nathan said. Change direction. Go somewhere they don't expect. Where Sarah looked around. We're on a mountain trail with drops on both sides. There, Nathan pointed to a narrow ravine that split off from the main trail, barely wide enough for a horse to navigate. It looked treacherous, potentially deadly, but it also led away from the direction their pursuers wanted them to go. That's insane, Sarah said. Insane is riding into an ambush. He turned Flint toward the ravine. Trust me. I do, Sarah said simply. Those 2 words hit Nathan harder than any declaration. She followed without further argument, and they plunged into the ravine. It was even worse than it looked. A twisting channel of broken rock and stunted pines with walls that pressed in claustrophobically on both sides. They had to dismount and lead the horses, testing each step, praying the ground would not give way beneath them. Behind them, shouts echoed off the mountains as their pursuers realized they had broken from the expected route. The ravine descended steeply, dropping them into a thick forest of lodgepole pine and aspen. Nathan risked a glance back and saw no signs of pursuit. The ravine was too narrow, too dangerous for multiple riders to follow quickly. They had bought themselves time. Keep moving, he urged, and they remounted, pushing through the forest at a pace that was reckless but necessary. Branches whipped their faces and tore at their clothes, but neither slowed. They burst out of the tree line into a meadow carpeted with autumn grass, and Nathan finally allowed himself to breathe. We lost them, Sarah said, disbelief and relief mixing in her voice. For now. Nathan studied their surroundings, trying to orient himself. The ravine had taken them miles off course into country he did not recognize. Mountains surrounded them on three sides, and the only obvious exit from the meadow was a narrow trail heading east. Not toward Helena, but not directly away from it either. Which way? Sarah asked. East for now, until we can find a landmark I recognize. Then we circle back north toward Helena. He nudged Flint forward, and we ride like hell is chasing us. Because it probably is. They rode through the afternoon and into evening, stopping only to rest the horses and take quick sips from their canteens. The country changed around them, transitioning from high alpine meadows to rolling foothills covered in sagebrush and juniper. Nathan's unease grew with each mile. They were lost. Not completely, but enough that he could not be sure they were heading in the right direction. And somewhere behind them, Crane's men were regrouping, tracking, coming. As the sun touched the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Nathan made a decision. We need to stop for the night, he said. Find shelter. The horses can't keep this pace. Neither can we, Sarah admitted. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, dark circles under her eyes. They found a small hollow protected by a ring of boulders with clear sight lines in all directions. Nathan did not risk a fire. The smoke would be visible for miles. So they ate cold food from Ann Porter's basket and wrapped themselves in the bedrolls George had provided. Sarah sat with her back against a boulder, the leather envelope in her lap. She pulled out the letters and read them by fading light, her lips moving silently. What are you thinking? Nathan asked. She looked up. I'm thinking about my father, about how he knew Crane would kill him if he did not give up the ranch. But he fought anyway. Fought because he believed the law meant something, because he thought justice would prevail. Her eyes filled with tears. What if he was wrong? What if we get to Helena and the marshal won't help? What if Crane's reach extends even that far? Nathan moved to sit beside her. Then we make him help. We don't give him a choice. He took her hand. Your father wasn't wrong, Sarah. He was just early. He started a fight he couldn't finish alone. But he made sure you would have what you needed to finish it for him. That's not failure. That's faith. Faith in you. Faith in the system. Faith that eventually the truth wins out. And if it doesn't, then we keep fighting until it does. He squeezed her hand. I'm not giving up on this, on you, on us, not now, not ever. Sarah set aside the letters and turned to face him fully. In the twilight, her face was beautiful despite the fading bruises. Her eyes dark and deep and full of things Nathan was only beginning to understand. When this is over, she said softly, when Crane's in prison or dead or whatever justice looks like for him, what happens to us? What do you want to happen? She paused, choosing her words carefully. I want to rebuild my father's ranch. Not as it was, but as he dreamed it could be. I want to raise cattle and maybe plant orchards like he talked about. I want to prove that good people can make it in this country without compromising their principles. That's a good dream, Nathan said. But I don't want to do it alone. She met his eyes directly. These past days with you, even with all the fear and danger, I've felt more alive than I have in years, more certain of who I am and what I'm capable of. You did that, not by rescuing me, but by believing in me, by treating me as a partner, not a victim. Nathan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah, I know we barely know each other. I know this might just be the intensity of the situation, the way danger can make people feel things that aren't real, but when I look at you, Sarah interrupted, when I think about the future, I want you in it, not just nearby, but with me, building something together. He kissed her then, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. This was a promise, a claim, a declaration of intent. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Yes, Nathan said simply, to all of it, yes. They held each other as darkness fell completely. The stars came out cold and bright and indifferent. And for a few stolen moments, the fear and danger and impossible odds faded into background noise. There was just the warmth of Sarah's body against his, the steady rhythm of her breathing, and the wild, terrifying hope that maybe they would both survive to see what came next. A sound jolted them apart, the distant crack of a breaking branch, too loud to be an animal, too close to be ignored. Nathan was on his feet instantly, his hand going to his rifle. "What was it?" Sarah whispered. "Don't know. Could be nothing." But his instincts were screaming otherwise. There, another sound. Closer this time, the soft crunch of boot on stone. "We've got company," Nathan breathed. "Get to the horses, quiet as you can." They moved together, both crouching low, working their way toward where Flint and Silver stood hobbled at the edge of their camp. Nathan's hands shook as he undid the hobbles, praying they would have time to mount up before... Well, well, well. The voice came from the darkness above them, accompanied by the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Nathan froze his blood, running cold. A man stepped into view on top of one of the boulders silhouetted against the stars. He was tall and lean with a rifle trained casually on Nathan's chest. Behind him, two more figures appeared, cutting off any escape. "William Crane sends his regards," the man said, his voice carrying amusement. "And he wants his property back. The papers and the girl." He paused. "You can live cross if you're smart about this. Just walk away and we'll forget you were ever involved." Nathan's mind raced, calculating angles and distances and the impossibility of getting to his rifle before a bullet found him. Beside him, he felt Sarah go rigid with fear. "No deal," Nathan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "The lady's not property, and those papers are going to Helena." The man laughed. "That's real brave, Cross. Stupid but brave. Crane said you might be difficult." He shifted his rifle slightly. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to throw down your weapons nice and slow. Then the lady's going to hand over those papers. Then we're all going to take a little ride back to Crane's ranch where this whole mess gets sorted out permanent-like. And if we refuse, then I shoot you where you stand and take what we came for." The man's voice hardened. "Your choice, but make it quick. I'm getting tired of talking." Nathan looked at Sarah, saw the fear in her eyes, but also the determination. She had come too far to surrender now, and so had he. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. He met the gunman's eyes and smiled, cold and hard. "You're going to have to take them." The man's expression shifted from amusement to annoyance. "Have it your way." Everything happened at once. Act 3 of The Road to Helena. The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. Nathan grabbed Sarah and dove sideways, shouting for the horses to run. The rifle barked deafeningly loud in the enclosed space of the boulder ring, and Nathan felt the bullet pass so close to his head that it disturbed his hair. They hit the ground, rolling as more shots rang out, bullets striking stone and sending up sprays of sparks. Flint and Silver bolted, frightened by the noise, and Nathan prayed they would not go far. He came up with his revolver drawn, firing blind at the muzzle flashes above them. One of the shadowy figures grunted and fell. The others scattered, taking cover behind rocks. "Run!" Nathan shouted at Sarah, firing again to give her cover. "The ravine, go!" She ran and he followed, sprinting through the darkness with bullets chasing them. The ravine was maybe 50 yards away, a black slash in the earth that promised either escape or death. Sarah reached it first and did not hesitate. She jumped, disappearing into the darkness. Nathan leaped after her, his stomach lurching as he fell through open air. He hit water. Cold, rushing water that knocked the breath from his lungs and swept him downstream. He flailed, trying to find purchase, trying to keep his head above the surface. The current was strong, pulling him under, spinning him like a leaf. Strong hands grabbed his arm. Sarah, soaked and gasping, but alive, pulled him toward the bank. They crawled out onto muddy ground, coughing and shaking with cold and shock. Above them, on the rim of the ravine, came shouts and the flash of more gunfire. But the bullets went wide. The shooters had lost them in the darkness and the water. "They lost us," Sarah gasped. "The water. They can't track us in the water." "Not tonight, anyway." Nathan pushed himself to his feet, every muscle screaming. "But come daylight, they'll find our trail. We need to move now." They stumbled downstream, following the creek as it wound through the darkness. Every sound made them flinch. Every shadow seemed to hide enemies. But slowly, painfully, they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. By the time the first gray light of dawn touched the sky, they had covered maybe 5 miles. They emerged from the creek in a grove of cottonwoods, both shivering violently, both alive by margins too narrow to measure. "The horses," Sarah said through chattering teeth. "The supplies, everything's gone." "Not everything." Nathan patted his coat and felt the reassuring bulk of his revolver. "We've still got our weapons. And you've still got—" Sarah's hand went to her bodice and her face flooded with relief. "The summary, it's still here, wet but readable." "Then we've still got a chance." Nathan looked toward the eastern horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "Helena's that way. Maybe 3 days on foot. Maybe 4. It's going to be hard and we'll be exposed. But it's our only shot." Sarah straightened her shoulders, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the cold, the fear, she managed to smile. "Then we'd better start walking." They set off into the rising sun, 2 figures on foot in a vast and hostile land carrying nothing but a soggy piece of paper and the stubborn refusal to give up. Behind them, William Crane's men would be organizing pursuit. Ahead of them lay 3 days of hard country with no food, no horses, and no guarantee of survival. But they walked anyway, because the alternative was surrender. And neither of them knew how to do that anymore. The morning warmed as they walked, drying their clothes and lifting some of the numbness from their limbs. They followed game trails when they could find them, and when they could not, they pushed through brush and over rocks moving steadily east. Nathan kept them to low ground where possible, using every bit of cover the land provided. By midday, hunger had become a constant companion. By evening, it had grown into a gnawing pain that made thinking difficult. They found a spring and drank deeply, filling their empty bellies with water. But it was not enough. They needed food, needed rest, needed a miracle. What they got was smoke. Nathan spotted it just as the sun was setting, a thin column rising from behind a low ridge maybe 2 miles south. Smoke meant people, and people meant either help or danger. "Could be a ranch," Sarah said hopefully. "Could be Crane's men," Nathan countered. "Or it could be our salvation." She looked at him with eyes that held both hope and desperation. "We have to try, Nathan. We won't last another day without food." She was right. They were already running on fumes. Another day of hard walking with no sustenance would finish them as surely as Crane's bullets. "All right," he said, "but we approach careful. Gout it out before we show ourselves." They worked their way toward the smoke, moving slowly as the light faded. The ridge resolved into a small homestead, a cabin, a barn, a corral with a few horses. Lamplight glowed in the windows and Nathan could smell food cooking. "Stay here," he whispered to Sarah. "Let me check it out first." "Nathan, please. If it's a trap, no sense both of us walking into it." He squeezed her hand. "I'll signal if it's safe." He moved forward alone, keeping to the shadows, his hand on his revolver. He worked his way around to a window and peered carefully inside. What he saw made his heart sink. Sitting at the table eating dinner with an elderly couple was Frank Murdoch, William Crane's foreman, the man who had led the siege at the rocks, the man who had sworn to bring them back to Crane, dead or alive, and worse. On the table beside Murdoch's plate, Nathan could see a familiar leather envelope. They had found flint and silver. They had found the papers, which meant everything they had suffered, everything they had risked, had been for nothing. Nathan stood frozen at the window, his mind reeling. The leather envelope sat there on the table like a death sentence. So close he could almost reach through the glass and grab it. Inside were all the original letters, all the proof of William Crane's crimes, everything they had risked their lives to protect, everything except the summary hidden in Sarah's clothing. That thought cut through his despair like a knife. They still had something. Not the originals, but enough. Sarah's careful transcription of the key facts, the critical names and dates. It was not perfect, but it might be enough to convince the territorial marshal to investigate. It had to be enough, because it was all they had left. He backed away from the window carefully, his heart hammering. Murdoch was laughing at something the old man had said, completely at ease. A glass of whiskey in his hand. He had no idea Nathan was watching, no idea his quarry was less than 30 yards away. Nathan retreated to where Sarah waited in the shadows, her face tense with worry. "What did you see?" she whispered. "Murdoch, he's inside with an old couple. And Sarah," he paused, hating what he had to say. "He's got the envelope, the papers your father hid. All of it." Her face went white. "How we had them with us when we jumped into the ravine. Must have been in my saddlebag instead of yours. When the horses bolted, Murdoch's men must have found them." Nathan took her hand, squeezing gently. But we've still got your summary. The copy you made, that's enough. A single sheet of paper against Crane's lawyers and his money. Sarah's voice cracked. Against a sheriff who's in his pocket. Without the originals, without my father's handwriting, it's just my word. They'll say I forged it. Then we make them believe. Nathan turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Your father wrote the truth. You copied the truth. That hasn't changed just because Murdoch got lucky. We can still do this. Sarah looked at him with eyes full of desperation and something else. A fragile, dangerous hope. How we get those papers back? That's insane. Murdoch's armed, probably has men outside watching. We have one revolver between us. No food, no horses. We can't. Can't isn't a word I'm interested in right now. Nathan glanced back at the cabin, his mind already working through possibilities. That envelope is sitting on the table in plain sight. Murdoch thinks he's won, thinks we're either dead or running scared. He's relaxed, comfortable. That's his mistake. Even if we could get inside, even if we could somehow take him by surprise, Nathan, he'll kill you. Maybe, or maybe I'll kill him first. He met her eyes steadily. I didn't come this far to give up now, did you? She stared at him for a long moment, and he watched the fear in her expression harden into determination. This was the woman who had survived Crane's brutality, who had jumped into a ravine in darkness, who had walked all day without complaint despite exhaustion and hunger. She was stronger than she knew. No, she said finally, I didn't. Good, then here's what we're going to do. Nathan laid out the plan quickly. With every word he could see, Sarah's doubt transforming into resolve. It was risky, insane even, but it was also their only chance. When he finished, she nodded once her jaw set. I can do this. I know you can. They separated, Nathan circling around to the barn while Sarah approached the front of the cabin. His role was simple. Get into position, wait for Sarah's signal, then move fast and hard. Her role was considerably more dangerous, and the thought of what could go wrong made his stomach clench. But there was no other way. Nathan reached the barn and slipped inside his Uis, adjusting to the darkness. 2 horses stood in stalls. In the corner he spotted what he had hoped for. Tools, a pitchfork, a shovel, a length of rope. Not weapons exactly, but better than nothing. He grabbed the rope and quickly fashioned a loop, testing the knot. It would hold. Through a gap in the barn wall, he could see the cabin's front door. Any moment now, Sarah would knock. Any moment now, everything would either work or fall apart. The knock came, sharp and clear in the evening quiet. Nathan tensed his hand, tightening on the rope. Inside the cabin, he heard voices. Surprise. Confusion. Then footsteps approaching the door. It swung open, spilling lamplight across the porch. And Nathan heard the old man's voice. Lord have mercy, child. What happened to you? Sarah's response was faint, deliberately weak. Please, I need help. Been walking for days. No food, no water. Martha, get some blankets. The old man's voice rose with concern. This girl's half dead. Come in, come in. Let's get you by the fire. Nathan could not see them anymore, but he could imagine the scene. Sarah stumbling inside, the old couple fussing over her, and Murdoch sitting at that table, his eyes narrowing with recognition. He counted to 10, then 20, giving Sarah time to work her way into the room. Then he heard it, Sarah's voice louder now, with steel beneath the feigned weakness. You killed my father. Silence. Then Murdoch's voice, cold and amused. Well now, didn't expect to see you again, Miss Bennett. Figured you'd be at the bottom of that ravine with Cross. He's dead, drowned when we fell, but I survived, and I came for those papers. Murdoch laughed. These papers, the ones that prove your daddy was murdered. You got some spine, girl. I'll give Yisha on them. Walking right into the lion's den. Those papers belong to me. They belong to William Crane now, just like everything else that was your daddy's. Just like you're going to belong to him once I bring you in. I'm not going anywhere with you. That was Nathan's cue. He burst from the barn, the rope ready in his hands, and sprinted toward the cabin. Through the open door, he could see Murdoch standing, one hand reaching for his gun, the other grabbing for Sarah. Nathan hit the porch at a dead run and launched himself through the doorway. Murdoch spun his gun, half drawn, his face registering shock. Nathan threw the rope loop, and by some miracle it settled over Murdoch's shoulders. He yanked hard, pinning the man's arms to his sides. Murdoch roared and tried to break free, his strength enormous. But Nathan had momentum and desperation on his side. They crashed together into the table, sending dishes and the leather envelope flying. The old couple scrambled back with cries of alarm. Sarah dove for the envelope as it skidded across the floor. Murdoch's boot caught Nathan in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Suddenly, the rope was slack and Murdoch was free, his gun coming up. The old man moved faster than his years suggested, swinging a cast-iron skillet with surprising force. It connected with Murdoch's wrist with a crack, and the gun went flying. Murdoch bellowed in pain and rage, turning on the old man with murder in his eyes. Nathan hit him from behind, wrapping both arms around the bigger man's chest and driving him toward the door. They went through it together in a tangle of limbs, across the porch and down the steps, landing hard in the dirt. Nathan tasted blood, realized he had bitten his tongue. Murdoch got his hands around Nathan's throat and squeezed. Black spots danced across Nathan's vision. He drove his knee up into Murdoch's stomach. Once, twice. But the man's grip only tightened. The world started to gray out at the edges. Then Sarah was there, Murdoch's own gun in her hands, pressing the barrel against the side of his head. "Let him go," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Right now, or I pull this trigger." Murdoch's hands loosened. Nathan gasped in air, his throat on fire, and rolled away. Sarah kept the gun trained on Murdoch as the man slowly raised his hands. "You won't shoot," Murdoch said, but his voice held uncertainty. "You're not a killer." "You're right, I'm not." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "But I'm my father's daughter, and you murdered him. So maybe I'm wrong about what I'm capable of. Maybe we both are. Want to find out?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Murdoch's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Smart girl," he muttered. The old man appeared in the doorway with his own rifle, his wife beside him, looking fierce despite her gray hair. "Martha," he said, "fetch that rope. We're going to tie this snake up proper." They bound Murdoch hand and foot and locked him in the barn, still cursing and threatening. The old man, his name was Samuel Reed, Nathan learned, pumped Nathan's hand with surprising strength. "Took some guts, son," he said. "Charging in like that. Thought for sure that bastard was going to shoot you." "Thought the same thing myself." Nathan managed to smile despite his aching ribs and burning throat. "Thank you for the assist with the skillet. That was some quick thinking. Hell, I fought in the Mexican War. Still got some fight left in these old bones." Samuel turned to Sarah, his expression softening. "You all right, miss?" Sarah stood clutching the leather envelope to her chest, her whole body shaking now that the crisis had passed. "I am now, thank you. Both of you. If you hadn't helped." "Couldn't stand by and let that devil hurt you," Samuel said. He gestured toward the cabin. "Now you two come inside. Get some food in you. You look like death warmed over." Martha Reed appeared with bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. "Sit down and eat," she ordered. "You look like you haven't had a meal in days." They did not need to be told twice. The food was simple but hot, and Nathan could not remember anything tasting better. Between bites, he and Sarah explained everything. William Crane, the murder, the stolen ranch, the desperate flight toward Helena. Samuel's face darkened as he listened. Crane should have known. That man's been buying up land all through this territory, squeezing out honest folks. Been wondering when someone would finally stand up to him. "We're trying," Nathan said, "but we lost our horses, our supplies, everything except these papers and the clothes on our backs. And each other," Sarah added quietly, meeting Nathan's eyes across the table. Martha made a knowing sound. "Well, you can't make it to Helena on foot. That's certain." She looked at her husband. "Samuel, what about those two horses out in the barn, the ones the Johnsons left with us?" Samuel nodded slowly. "Chester and Molly. Good animals, both of them. The Johnsons won't be back for them until spring." He looked at Nathan and Sarah. "You can take them. Consider it a loan. When this business with Crane is settled, you can bring them back." "We can't accept," Nathan started. "Yes, you can, and you will." Samuel's tone left no room for argument. "That man in my barn works for a murderer. You're trying to bring that murderer to justice. Way I see it, helping you is the right thing to do. And I didn't live 73 years being wrong about right and wrong." Martha packed them provisions. Bread, cheese, dried meat, a canteen of water. She also insisted on tending to Sarah's fading bruises and Nathan's battered throat, applying salve that smelled of mint and something medicinal. "You'll want to leave before dawn," Samuel said, as they prepared to bed down for a few hours' rest. "That bastard in the barn probably has friends looking for him. The sooner you're gone, the safer Martha and I will be." "What about Murdoch?" Sarah asked. "You can't just keep him tied up in your barn." "Soon as you're clear, I'll take him to Sheriff Tate in the morning. Tell him I've found this man trying to rob me. With any luck, he'll be locked up before he can get word to Crane." "Sheriff Tate works for Crane," Nathan said. Samuel smiled grimly. "Maybe so, but he still has to keep up appearances. And I'm not without influence in this county. I'll make sure Murdoch stays put long enough for you two to make it to Helena." They slept for a few hours in the Reeds' small guest room, too exhausted to do anything but collapse onto the bed. Nathan woke once in the darkness to find Sarah pressed against his side, her hand clutched in his shirt, her face peaceful in sleep. He allowed himself a moment to watch her, to marvel at her strength and courage. For sleep claimed him again. Samuel woke them while the stars were still bright overhead. They dressed quickly and followed him to the barn, where Chester and Molly waited already saddled and ready. From the far stall came Murdoch's muffled curses. Samuel had gagged him to keep him quiet. "3 days' ride to Helena if you push hard," Samuel said, handing Nathan a rough map he had sketched by lamplight. "Stick to the main freight road once you hit Cutler's Valley. Too many witnesses for Crane's men to try anything obvious." They mounted up, and Nathan felt the difference immediately. Chester was a solid bay gelding with an easy gait. Beside him, Sarah looked more comfortable on Molly than she had in days. Martha appeared with one last bundle. "Extra blankets. Nights are getting cold." She looked up at Sarah with fierce maternal concern. "You be careful, child. And when you've won, because you will win, you come back and tell old Martha all about it." Sarah leaned down and embraced her. "I will, I promise." They rode out as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, leaving the Reed homestead and its kindly inhabitants behind. For the first time in days, Nathan felt something like hope. The freight road to Helena appeared by mid-morning, a wide track worn smooth by countless wagon wheels. As Samuel had predicted, they began encountering other travelers. Freight wagons hauling supplies. A mail coach. Small groups of miners heading to the goldfields. Each one made them safer, wrapping them in the protective cloak of witnesses and civilization. They rode hard through the day, stopping only to rest the horses and take quick meals. The country gradually changed around them, the wild frontier giving way to something more settled. Farms appeared in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, children playing in yards, signs of law and order, of a world where men like William Crane could not act with impunity. By evening of the second day, they had covered nearly 60 miles. They camped that night in a grove of trees just off the road, and Nathan built a small fire there first since the night they had been ambushed. The warmth and light felt like a luxury after days of cold and darkness. Sarah sat close to the flames, the leather envelope open in her lap, reading through her father's letters by firelight. Nathan watched the play of emotions across her face. Grief, anger, determination. "He knew," she said finally. "My father. He knew Crane would kill him if he didn't give up the ranch. But he fought anyway. Fought because he believed the law meant something, because he thought justice would prevail." She looked up at Nathan, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What if he was wrong? What if we get to Helena and the marshal won't help? What if Crane's reach extends even that far?" Nathan moved to sit beside her. "Then we make him help. We don't give him a choice." He took her hand. "Your father wasn't wrong, Sarah. He was just early. He started a fight he couldn't finish alone, but he made sure you'd have what you needed to finish it for him. That's not failure. That's faith. Faith in you. Faith in the system. Faith that eventually the truth wins out. And if it doesn't, then we keep fighting until it does." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not giving up on this. On you. On us. Not now. Not ever." Sarah set aside the letters and turned to face him fully. In the firelight, her face was beautiful despite the fading bruises. Her eyes dark and deep and full of things Nathan was only beginning to understand. They held each other as the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead. Two people who had found something precious in the midst of chaos and refused to let it go. Dawn of the third day broke clear and cold. They rode out early, both feeling the pull of their destination. Helena was close now, Maybe 8 hours ride if they pushed the horses. Close enough that Nathan could taste it. But as the morning wore on, he became aware of a prickling sensation between his shoulder blades. The feeling of being watched. He scanned the road behind them, but saw nothing obvious, just the normal traffic of the freight route. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, noticing his tension. "Not sure, just a feeling." He kept his hand near his revolver. "Stay alert." They passed through a small settlement around midday. A general store, a blacksmith, a saloon. Nathan considered stopping to ask about Crane's influence in the area, but decided against it. Better to keep moving, get to Helena, get these papers into official hands. As they left the settlement behind, 3 riders fell in behind them. Casual, not obviously threatening, but maintaining a steady distance. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Don't look back," he told Sarah quietly. "But we've picked up a tail. 3 men, maybe 200 yards behind us." "Crane's men." "Probably, though they can't try anything on the main road. Too many witnesses." But as afternoon faded toward evening and the traffic on the road thinned, the 3 riders began to close the distance. Elias urged Chester into a faster pace. Sarah matched him on Molly. The riders behind them accelerated as well. "They're hurting us," Sarah said, her voice tight, "waiting until we're isolated." She was right. The smart thing would be to stop, to wait for more travelers to catch up, to use the protection of numbers. But Helena was so close, and every delay gave Crane more time to prepare his defenses. Nathan made a decision. "We run. There's a town 5 miles ahead called Silverside. If we can make it there before dark, we'll have shelter and witnesses." "How they'll see us?" "Not if we give them something else to watch." They kicked their horses into a gallop. Behind them, the 3 riders did the same. And suddenly the pretense of casual travel evaporated. This was a chase now, open and desperate. Chester and Molly were fresh and strong, but the horses behind them were being pushed hard. The distance began to close. 400 yards. 300. Close enough now that Nathan could see faces. Hard men with cold eyes and rifles across their saddles. Sarah's hat flew off her hair, streaming behind her as she leaned low over Molly's neck. Nathan kept pace beside her, his heart hammering, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. There, buildings appearing through the trees. Silverside, they were going to make it. A gunshot cracked behind them, and Nathan heard the bullet whine past. They were firing now. Damn the witnesses, damn the consequences. Crane must have given orders to stop them at any cost. More shots. Closer now. And Chester stumbled slightly as a bullet grazed his flank. The horse recovered and lunged forward with desperate speed. They thundered into Silverside with their pursuers less than 100 yards behind, both horses lathered and blowing hard. Nathan pulled up in front of a building with a star painted on the window. A sheriff's office. Thank God. He half fell from the saddle. "Inside," he shouted at Sarah. They burst through the door as their pursuers pulled up outside, their rifles raised. A man in a deputy's badge jumped to his feet, his hand going to his gun. "What in hell, Bain? Those men outside work for William Crane." Nathan said, his words tumbling out. "They've been chasing us for 3 days, trying to kill us, to keep us from reaching Helena. We have evidence that Crane murdered this woman's father. We need protection." The deputy looked from them to the men outside, his young face uncertain. "Crane, William Crane, from down in the Bitterroot Valley?" "That's the one. I know Crane. He's a respected landowner. Got friends in the territorial government." Nathan's heart sank. Not another one in Crane's pocket. But then the deputy's expression hardened. "And I also know he's been buying up land awful fast. Awful cheap. Been wondering how he managed that." He moved to the window and called out, "You men outside, state your business." One of the riders, a scar-faced man with dead-eye eyes, called back, "Those 2 are wanted for horse theft. We're just bringing them in." "That's so." The deputy turned to Nathan and Sarah. "You steal those horses." "They were loaned to us by Samuel Reed," Sarah said, "to help us get to Helena, to help us get justice for my father's murder." "Samuel Reed." The deputy's expression softened. "Old Samuel owns the place up near Cutler's Valley." At Sarah's nod, he smiled. "I know Samuel. Good man. If he loaned you horses, that's good enough for me." He called back out the window. "These folks are under my protection. You boys can ride back to Crane and to tell him they'll be in Helena by tomorrow. and there's not a damn thing he can do about it. The scar-faced man's expression twisted with rage. You're making a mistake, deputy. Maybe so. But it's my mistake to make. Now clear out before I arrest you for discharging firearms within town limits. The three men sat their horses for a long, tense moment. Then with visible reluctance, they turned and rode away, their faces dark with fury. The deputy let out a breath and turned back to Nathan and Sarah. Name's Jack Sullivan, and you two look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to sleep. Nathan felt tears of relief prick his eyes. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I do. Sullivan looked at the leather envelope Sarah still clutched. My own father lost his land to a man like Crane. Didn't have proof. Couldn't fight back. Died bitter and broken. His jaw set. If you've got evidence that can bring Crane down, then helping you is the least I can do. They spent that night in a real bed for the first time in days, with real food in their bellies and real hope in their hearts. Sarah fell asleep almost instantly, but Nathan lay awake for a while, listening to her breathing and thinking about how far they had come. Tomorrow they would reach Helena. Tomorrow they would hand over the papers to the territorial marshal. Tomorrow, finally, they would see justice done. But tonight, in this small room, in this small town, with Sarah warm and safe beside him, Nathan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out. Morning came with crisp autumn sunshine. Sullivan was waiting outside with 3 horses saddled and ready. His own mount and fresh horses for Nathan and Sarah. Chester and Molly would rest here until they could be returned to Samuel Reed. They rode out of Silverside with Sullivan between them, his deputy's badge catching the light. The last miles to Helena passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. Every rise in the road might reveal the territorial capital. Every turn might bring them face to face with their goal. And then finally there it was. Helena spread out in a valley below them. Buildings and streets and church spires, civilization and law, and the promise of justice. The territorial marshal's office stood in the center of town, a solid stone building that looked like it could withstand a siege. They rode up to it and dismounted. Sarah gripped Nathan's hand so hard his fingers hurt. "This is it," she whispered. "This is it," he agreed. Together with Sullivan at their backs and the evidence clutched safely in Sarah's hands, they climbed the steps and walked through the door, bar into whatever came next. The territorial marshal's office smelled of pipe tobacco and old paper, with morning sunlight streaming through tall windows that illuminated dust motes dancing in the air. Behind a massive oak desk sat Marshal Theodore Hayes, a man in his late 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of human nature to be easily fooled. He looked up as they entered, his gaze taking in their travel-worn appearance. Sarah's fading bruises and the desperate hope written across both their faces. "Help you folks." His voice was measured, neither welcoming nor dismissive. Sullivan stepped forward. "Marshal Hayes, I'm Deputy Jack Sullivan from Silverside. These people have information about a murder, a serious matter that needs your immediate attention." Hayes set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Go on." Sarah moved forward, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the leather envelope on the desk. "My name is Sarah Bennett. 6 months ago, my father, James Bennett, was murdered by William Crane so that Crane could steal our ranch. Everything you need to prove it is in here." The marshal's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "William Crane, the landowner from Bitterroot Valley." "Yes, sir." "That's a serious accusation, Miss Bennett. William Crane is a man of considerable influence in this territory." "I know what he is," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He's a murderer and a thief, and I have the proof." Hayes opened the envelope and began reading. The room fell silent except for the ticking of a wall clock and the rustle of paper. Nathan watched the marshal's face, trying to read his reaction, but the man's expression remained carefully neutral. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Hayes read through every letter, every document, his eyes moving methodically across each page. When he finally looked up, his face was grave. "This is your father's handwriting." "Yes, sir. I'd recognize it anywhere." "And you can verify these claims, the threats Crane made, the circumstances of your father's death." "I can, and there are others who witnessed Crane's behavior." She listed them: Samuel Reed, George and Ann Porter, others who had seen Crane's pattern of intimidation. Hayes tapped at the papers thoughtfully. These letters to the lawyer and Helena. Jonathan Hughes, I know the man. He's dead, Miss Bennett. Died 3 months ago. Heart attack, the doctor said. Nathan spoke up. Or another murder made to look like natural causes. Hayes stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment he was silent. Then he began to speak. I've been hearing rumors about William Crane for over a year now. Nothing concrete, nothing I could act on. Men losing their land under suspicious circumstances. Accidents that seemed too convenient. Debt papers appearing from nowhere. He turned back to them. But Crane's always been careful, always covered his tracks. His eyes locked on Sarah. Until now, apparently. So you'll investigate, Sarah's voice held desperate hope. I'll do more than investigate. Hayes moved to his door and called out, Matthews. A younger man appeared, lean and sharp-eyed, wearing a deputy's badge. Sir, I need you to assemble a team, 6 good men, ones who can't be bought or intimidated. We're riding to Bitterroot Valley to arrest William Crane. Matthews' eyebrows rose. Crane, that's gonna cause trouble, sir? I'm aware. That's why I want good men. Have them ready to ride within the hour. As Matthews hurried off, Hayes turned back to Nathan and Sarah. You two will stay here in Helena until this is resolved. I'll put you up at the Granville Hotel under protective custody. Crane's reach extends this far, and I don't want him getting to you before we have him in chains. Sarah started to protest. I want to go with you. When you arrest him, I want to be there. Absolutely not, Hayes said firmly. It's too dangerous. You've done your part, Miss Bennett. You brought me the evidence. Now let me do mine. Nathan squeezed Sarah's hand gently. He's right. We've come this far. Let's not throw it away now. Hayes's expression softened slightly. I promise you, Miss Bennett. William Crane will answer for what he's done to you and your father. You have my word on that. 3 days they waited. 3 days of strange limbo in the Granville Hotel. Meals brought by staff, a doctor who examined Sarah's injuries and declared them healing well. Sullivan stopping by daily with news and reassurance. On the evening of the 3rd night, a messenger arrived from Hayes. Nathan read the message aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. William Crane arrested without incident. Brought to Helena for trial. Additional evidence discovered during search of property confirms fraud and intimidation charges. Several of Crane's men have turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced sentences. Trial set to begin in 2 weeks. Your presence required to testify. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. They got him. They actually got him. They got him, Nathan confirmed. She began to cry. Great shuddering sobs of relief and grief and vindication all mixed together. Nathan pulled her into his arms and held her as the weight of 6 months lifted from her shoulders. The trial of William Crane became the talk of Helena. The courthouse was packed every day with people standing in the aisles and crowding around the windows to hear the proceedings. Crane sat at the defense table in his expensive suit, his face a mask of arrogant confidence. But Nathan could see the fear lurking behind his eyes. Sarah testified on the 2nd day, her voice clear and steady as she described her father's dreams for the ranch, Crane's escalating threats, the night she was attacked in the barn. The jury listened with rapt attention, and Nathan saw several of them wiping their eyes as Sarah spoke of her father's death. The defense attorney tried to shake her story, suggested she had fabricated the evidence, that her father had indeed borrowed money from Crane and simply failed to repay it. But Sarah stood firm, and when the prosecutor produced the letters in James Bennett's own hand, letters that matched samples of his writing from before he ever met Crane, the defense case began to crumble. Nathan testified next, describing the scene in the barn, Murdoch's admission that Crane had ordered Sarah silenced, the desperate chase to Helena. His testimony was clear, factual, unshakable. Then came the supporting witnesses. George and Ann Porter testified about Crane's reputation for squeezing landowners, about their son Thomas and his suspicious riding accident. Samuel Reed testified about Murdoch's appearance at his homestead, about Crane's pattern of intimidation. Others came forward, victims of Crane's schemes who had been too afraid to speak before. Frank Murdoch, Crane's foreman, also testified after cutting a deal with the prosecutor. His testimony corroborated the pattern of intimidation and violence Crane had employed across the territory. But the most damning testimony came from Jack Reeves, one of Crane's hired guns who had decided that loyalty was not worth a hanging. Reeves described in cold, precise detail how Crane had arranged James Bennett's accident, how the horse had been deliberately spooked with gunfire, how Bennett's neck had been broken in the fall, how Reeves had been ordered to dispose of the horse's body to hide the evidence of shooting. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Crane lunged to his feet, shouting that Reeves was a liar, that he had been coerced into false testimony. But the damage was done. When order was finally restored, Nathan could see that the jury had already decided. The verdict came on the seventh day. The foreman stood a sheet of paper trembling in his weathered hands. We, the jury, find the defendant, William Crane, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of fraud, guilty of intimidation, guilty of theft by deception. The courtroom exploded with applause and shouting. The judge hammered his gavel for order. When silence finally fell, the judge looked at Crane with cold disgust. William Crane, you have been found guilty of crimes that strike at the very heart of civilized society. You have murdered, stolen, and terrorized innocent people for your own gain. This court sentences you to hang by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out 30 days hence. May heaven have mercy on your soul, for this court has none. Crane's face went white, then purple with rage. He started to speak. This isn't over, you. A bailiff struck him across the mouth. Shut up, Crane. You're done talking. They dragged him away, and Nathan felt Sarah collapse against him, her body shaking with silent sobs. Not grief, release. A burden finally lifted. Justice finally served. Outside the courthouse, Marshal Hayes found them. Miss Bennett, I wanted you to know. The court has ruled that all property fraudulently taken by William Crane will be returned to its rightful owners. That includes your father's ranch. It's yours again. Sarah looked up at him with streaming eyes. Thank you, Marshal, for believing me, for acting when others wouldn't. Hayes tipped his hat. I only did my job, ma'am. You're the one who had the courage to fight. Legal proceedings took weeks, but eventually the ranch was officially restored to Sarah, along with financial compensation for the months of lost income. Other families received restitution as well. The territorial government began investigating other officials who might have been in Crane's pocket. Nathan and Sarah attended the hanging together, standing at the back of the crowd. Crane's arrogance had finally broken. He went to his death pale and shaking, all his confidence stripped away by the reality of his fate. When it was over, when the body had been cut down and the crowd had dispersed, Sarah turned to Nathan with clear eyes. It's done, she said. It's done, he agreed. They left Helena the next day, riding south together toward the Bitterroot Valley. Sullivan accompanied them as far as Silverside. Chester and Molly were returned, both well-rested and eager. The Reeds welcomed them for a night, celebrating the news of Crane's conviction with a dinner that lasted well into the evening. Nathan and Sarah returned Chester and Molly with deep gratitude, and Samuel refused any payment. Seeing that devil hang is payment enough, the old man said. When they finally reached the Bennett Ranch, Sarah sat her horse for a long moment, just staring at the house and barn and the land stretching away toward the mountains. Nathan could see emotions playing across her face. Grief for what she had lost, determination for what she would build, hope for what the future might hold. It's yours now, he said quietly. All of it. What are you going to do with it? She turned to look at him, and the smile that crossed her face was like sunrise breaking over the peaks. We're going to do with it exactly what my father dreamed. Build it into something worth having. Raise cattle, plant those orchards he talked about. Make it a place where people are judged by their character, not their connections or their money. Nathan's heart stuttered. Sarah dismounted and came to stand beside Chester, looking up at Nathan with eyes that held no doubt, no hesitation. That is if you're willing. I know your own ranch is waiting, and I have no right to ask you to give that up. But, yes, Nathan interrupted. He swung down from the saddle and took her hands. Yes to all of it. To building something together. To making your father's dream real. To whatever comes next. Marriage? Sarah asked bluntly. Is that something that comes next, or am I being too forward? Nathan laughed, the sound startled out of him by her directness. You're being exactly forward enough, and yes, marriage, if you'll have me. I'll have you, she said. The kiss was hard and certain, a promise sealed with touch. And when they pulled apart, both were grinning like fools. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Helena. Marshall Hayes stood as witness. The Porters and Reeds attended. Sarah wore a simple dress of blue calico. Nathan wore his best shirt with his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan felt his life finally click into focus. They returned to the ranch as Mr. and Mrs. Cross ready to begin the hard work of building something lasting. Nathan sold his 300 acres to a young homesteader and moved his few possessions to the Bennett place, their place now. The first year was brutal. They worked from dawn until well after dark, repairing buildings that Crane's neglect had damaged, rebuilding fences, acquiring cattle from ranchers who had known and respected James Bennett. George Porter extended them credit at fair terms. Samuel Reed helped them find reliable hands willing to work for honest wages. Slowly, painfully, the ranch began to come back to life. They planted the first apple trees in the spring, a small orchard on the south slope, where James Bennett had once stood, and painted pictures with words. Sarah cried when they tamped down the earth around the first sapling, and Nathan held her as the sun set behind the mountains. "He would be so proud of you," Nathan murmured against her hair. "Of us," Sarah corrected. "This is our dream now, mine and yours and his, all woven together." By the second year, the ranch was turning a profit, small at first, but steady. They added more cattle, expanded the orchards, built a new bunkhouse for the growing crew of ranch hands. Word spread that the Cross Ranch was a good place to work, where men were treated fairly and paid honestly, and they never lacked for help when they needed it. In the spring of their third year together, Sarah announced she was pregnant. Nathan felt terror and joy in equal measure, his hands trembling as he placed them gently on her still flat belly. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We're going to have a baby." "We are," Sarah covered his hands with hers. "What do you think, boy or girl? Doesn't matter, as long as you're both healthy." She was more than fine. The pregnancy was difficult at times, but Sarah bore it with the same determination she brought to everything else. When her time came in late autumn with snow already dusting the mountain peaks, she labored for 18 hours before delivering a healthy baby girl with a strong cry and her father's dark eyes. They named her Faith, Faith Bennett Cross. Born into a world her grandfather had dreamed of, but never lived to see. As Nathan held his daughter for the first time standing at the window of their bedroom and looking out at the land they had fought so hard to claim, he thought about the night he had heard Sarah scream, the choice he had made to ride toward it instead of away, the chain of events that had followed. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked from the bed, her voice tired but content. "How different everything is from 3 years ago. How one choice, one moment can change everything. Do you regret it, any of it?" He looked at his wife, exhausted and beautiful, then at his daughter, tiny and perfect, then out at the ranch spreading away under the autumn sun. "Not for a second," he said. Epilogue, Christmas 2014. The fire had burned down to embers in the stone hearth. Outside, the Montana snow still fell, covering the Cross Ranch in silence and white. Nathan Cross, 82 years old, sat in his grandfather's chair and watched his grandson's face. Jacob had listened to every word, absorbed every detail, and now he sat in silence, processing, understanding. "Years kept passing," Nathan said softly. "Faith was joined by a brother we named Daniel for his grandfather. The orchards matured and began producing fruit that became known throughout the territory. The cattle herd grew until the Cross brand was respected from Helena to Canada." He paused, looking into the dying fire. "Other families moved into the valley, drawn by our reputation for fairness and community. A small town began to form near the ranch. First just a general store and a blacksmith, then a school, then a church. Your grandmother insisted on funding the school herself. She remembered how education had given her the tools to fight back when everything seemed lost." Jacob leaned forward, his eyes intent. "We built a new barn to replace the one where she was almost killed," Nathan continued. "Above the door I carved a dedication. Built on faith, trust, and the courage to answer a scream in the dark." He looked directly at his grandson. "You see, Jacob, there are things I learned that night. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. Your chum, your safety, your comfort. But doing the wrong thing costs more. It costs your soul." Nathan leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "You asked me if you should speak up about your boss. I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you this, the man you are is defined by the choices you make when it's hard, when no one's looking, when there's a real cost to telling the truth. I heard a scream that night and rode toward it. Didn't know if I'd live or die, but I knew I couldn't live with myself if I turned away. That decision brought me everything I hold dear. My wife, my children, this ranch, this legacy, all from one moment of courage. Jacob sat silent for a moment. Then with tears in his eyes, he stood and embraced his grandfather. Thank you, Grandpa. I know what to do now. Nathan smiled. Good, because this legacy isn't built on silence. It's built on people brave enough to speak when it matters. Now go make your grandfather proud. Jacob left walking into the snowy night with straight shoulders and new purpose. Nathan watched from the window as his grandson drove away. The Cross Ranch spread out below under moonlight, 4 generations removed from that scream in the twilight, all because one man chose to ride toward the sound instead of away. He whispered into the quiet room to the ghosts of Sarah and James Bennett and all those who had built this legacy with courage and sacrifice. Best choice I ever made. The fire died to ash, the snow continued to fall, and in the great room of the Cross Ranch, an old man sat surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. A life built on the simple truth that sometimes when you hear someone screaming in the darkness, you ride toward the sound, because that's what good men do. And in the doing, they become the men they were always meant to be.